Imagine you are 40,000 years ago. You are running across uneven ground, hunting, and your foot catches a rock wrong. You hear it before you feel it, a crack. You look down and your leg is bent at an angle it was never supposed to bend. There are no hospitals. There are no doctors. There is no one coming with a stretcher. There is only your tribe, a fire, and whatever they know. What happens next is the question, because the obvious answer is that you die. A broken femur bleeds internally. It swells. It goes septic within days in a world with no antibiotics. It stops you from walking, hunting, or contributing anything to the group that needs you to survive. Every logical reading of ancient life says a broken bone was a death sentence. Clean, fast, inevitable. Except it wasn't. And the proof has been sitting in the fossil record for decades, hiding in plain sight inside bones that should not have healed, and did. The oldest confirmed healed fracture in the human fossil record belongs to a Homo erectus individual found in Kenya. The bone in question is a femur. It broke completely, and then, over weeks and months, new bone grew around the breakpoint, fusing it back together. This individual survived long enough for full skeletal repair to occur. That process takes a minimum of several weeks of near-total immobility. In a world where movement meant survival, someone kept this person still. Someone fed them. Someone stood between them and everything that could have finished them off while they lay there unable to move. That is not luck. That is a system. And once you start looking, that system shows up everywhere. Archaeologists have found healed fractures in arms, legs, ribs, and skulls across Neanderthal and early human sites throughout Europe and Asia. Not one or two anomalies, dozens of cases. Fractures that, by all medical logic, should have killed their owners within days. Instead, the bone fused. The person recovered. They kept living, which means that somewhere in the ancient world, someone had figured out not just how to survive a broken bone, but how to treat one. So what did they actually do? The first and most critical step is immobilization. A broken bone that keeps moving will not heal. It will grind against itself, swell, and poison the surrounding tissue. Ancient humans could not have known the biology behind this, but they did not need to. They watched. They watched injured animals, they watched each other, they watched what happened when a broken limb was left to move freely, and what happened when it was not. That knowledge was not written anywhere. It was paid for in deaths, and the survivors remembered what worked. The logical conclusion of that observation is a splint. You hold the broken limb still by binding it to something rigid. Wood, bone, bark, dried animal hide, plant stems. Every one of these materials was available, and evidence of their use as binding materials exists at ancient sites across multiple continents. The direct evidence of prehistoric splinting is difficult to preserve because organic materials rot over thousands of years. But the bones themselves tell the story. Healed fractures in the fossil record frequently show clean, aligned regrowth, the kind of straight, even fusion that only happens when a limb has been properly held in place during healing. The bones did not fuse crookedly. They fused straight. That does not happen by accident. That happens because someone held them there. Then there is pain. A serious fracture produces a level of pain that is genuinely difficult to describe, the kind that makes coherent thought impossible. Ancient humans had no morphine, no surgery, no anesthesia of any kind, but they had plants, and by 40,000 years ago they had been using plants medicinally for longer than we can fully trace. Neanderthal dental plaque found at sites in Spain contained traces of plants with no nutritional value, plants with documented anti-inflammatory and pain-relieving properties. They were not eating them for calories. Willow bark, which contains salicin, the compound your body converts into the same active molecule found in aspirin, has documented medical use going back at least 3,500 years. The actual practice almost certainly goes much further back than that. A person lying immobile with a shattered leg was almost certainly being given something for the pain, not out of sentimentality, because a person screaming in agony attracts predators, exhausts the group, and cannot eat or rest enough to heal. Managing pain was strategy, although at some point, around some fire, it probably became something else too. Food was the final piece. Bone repair is metabolically expensive. The body needs protein, fat, and calories in significant quantities to rebuild skeletal tissue. A person who cannot hunt or gather cannot feed themselves, which means that treating a fracture in the ancient world was not a single act. It was a commitment. Someone had to keep bringing food to this person for weeks, possibly months. In a world where every calorie required effort to obtain, that was not a small thing to offer. And here is where the evidence becomes extraordinary. In a cave in northern Iraq called Shanidar, archaeologists excavating in the 1950s and 60s found the remains of a Neanderthal male now known as Shanidar 1. He had lived to somewhere between 40 and 50 years old. His right arm had withered almost entirely from severe early damage. He had sustained skull injuries that had likely left him partially blind. His spine and joints showed arthritis severe enough to have made every movement painful. He could not have hunted. He could not have gathered food. He could not have defended himself. And yet he had lived for decades after these injuries. Shanidar 1 is not just evidence that ancient humans treated fractures. He is evidence of what that treatment actually required over the long term. The splint and the willow bark and the food were not one-time interventions. They were sustained, repeated, daily acts of care carried out over years by people who had enough to survive themselves and chose to share it anyway. Every practical step we have described, the immobilization, the pain relief, the nutrition, Shanidar 1 needed all of them. Not for weeks, for decades. And he received them. His bones are the proof. That is what handling a broken bone actually meant in the ancient world. Not a procedure, a promise. You broke something, and your group decided, collectively and without negotiation, that you were worth the cost of putting back together. The splint was technology. The plants were pharmacology. But the decision to stay, to keep feeding someone, to keep protecting someone, to keep carrying weight that was not yours, that was something else entirely. The next time you break something and a doctor sets it and wraps it and sends you home to rest, you are at the end of a line that stretches back further than our species. The materials changed. The knowledge changed. The instinct that made someone reach for a piece of bark and a length of hide and kneel down beside a person who could not stand up. That never changed at all. If you found this interesting, subscribe. Every video is built on the same question. What were we before we were this?